Hello everyone, and welcome to another video about the BMW X3 E83. This video was originally going to be a video going over the valve cover gasket replacement, but unfortunately it changed a little bit. In the middle of filming it, I kind of lost patience and decided to just focus on the repair, and so this is going to be a little bit different. Instead, I would say go ahead and take a look at Ask the Car Experts. Roger did a great write-up and YouTube video, which is available here. And for the actual procedure on how to do the valve cover gasket replacement, I would follow that. This video is going to talk a little bit more about some of the symptoms I had and what changing the valve cover gasket fixed for me. So I was having a couple of problems after I did the automatic transmission fluid replacement. I felt this thing which was referred to as the Bmw Clunk. When I was coming to a stop, I kind of felt this last downshift right before I came to a stop, and just kind of rough shifting happened after I changed the automatic transmission fluid, so I thought maybe there was a problem with too much fluid in there, not enough fluid, so I wasn't exactly sure what was going on. I also noticed that sometimes the RPMs would bounce up and down when I first started the car, which was another issue. I wasn't exactly sure what was causing that. Another thing also is I noticed previously when I changed the spark plugs at around 95,000 miles, I believe, that cylinder 3 had a little bit of oil in it. And at first I thought that maybe just the previous owner had spilled some oil down in there and it had accumulated and it just had been stuck there. It never really occurred to me that it might be because of the valve cover gasket around the cylinder hole. Maybe that was potentially leaking. And now that I've done the valve cover gasket and the gaskets that go around the cylinder holes, I'm pretty sure that was what the problem was. Oil was getting in through the valve cover gasket. And I also noticed that when I was up in the snow driving, the check engine light came on. And a little bit of research on this. What happened was I went ahead and I went to AutoZone and I used their service to read your codes, and I came back with the P0171 code. And this is, for those that don't know, it means that you're running a little bit lean. And typically what happens is you have some sort of intake leak. And what's happening is the oxygen sensor on the exhaust is seeing that there's more unburned oxygen in the exhaust, and so it's going ahead and it's adding more gas to the mixture to try to get all of that oxygen to burn. And eventually you get the check engine light on once it's putting much more than 20% extra fuel mixture into that intake mixture. So that's what happened to me when I went up to the snow. I got the check engine light. When I came back down, it was still on, but I actually wasn't having the error. When I looked at it, it wasn't active, but it was stored. Also want to note that I have the BMW programmer, I think it's 1.7, and this didn't really help at all. This was just to kind of look at my computer and look at some settings. It has an option to clear codes, but it really did not help me at all with this particular issue. And so I read that when you have some sort of running lean or what we think is some sort of intake air leak, the thing that you need to do is go ahead and do a smoke test on it. So I went ahead to my neighborhood BMW repair shop, and it's a German guy that works there and owns it. So first thing he wants to do, even though I had told him what the code is and I wanted the smoke test, we have to go through his procedure. So the first thing we have to do is do a reading on the computer, and he did that. That was $90. It was inconclusive, so he said the next thing we want to do is run the smoke test like I had suggested since we had the lean code. So we went ahead and we did that, and I'll show you here in the picture there was smoke coming right from cylinder 3. So that area where the oil had leaked in, it was also causing some sort of leak as well. And they recommended that I do the valve cover gasket. They also recommended I get a new valve cover. So about $1,200 for the repair on that one. So from there, I went ahead and bought a cheap programmer on eBay and went and cleared the code myself. Again, I couldn't use the BMW 1.7 programmer that you find on eBay. Just didn't clear the code. I had to use a cheap ODP2 code reader to clear it, but I went ahead and it cleared okay. And then I gave myself, probably about a month to gather up the parts, and drove around, and it was still having that issue. Then eventually, when I decided to do the job, again, you could see Roger Ask the Car Experts did it. It took me about, I'd say, somewhere between 3 to 6 hours to do it. It was actually kind of a longer job. Getting the valve cover gasket wasn't that bad. I would say it was probably 2 hours to do that. And when I was doing that, I'll tell you what the challenges I had. So removing the coil wire harness was definitely a challenge. The video that I've mentioned, they show you a couple of latches. I think there's 3 latches in the front that you need to disengage, and you feel that part of the harness starting to lift up. But there's some other latch that he doesn't explain how to release, and I just kept kind of pulling up harder and harder, and eventually I just pulled up and I broke the remaining latch to get the harness free. And it wasn't that big of a deal because when I reseated everything, I had the functional latches to keep everything in place, and it seems okay. But that was one thing. If you could figure out how to do that, that would be nice to save one latch. Another thing that was a little tricky to do was removing that oil ventilation hose, which is in the back by the firewall. That one was tricky. You can supposedly squeeze the latch to unclick it and pull it apart. That didn't work. I ended up using a pick and kind of like stuck a pick in there and got one end loose and kind of like backed that latch out and then slid the pick around 180 degrees to the other side and then got that one loose and it finally came free. It's difficult because you can't tell how close you are to doing it. It's in a really awkward position where you're reached way over the engine, and you need to use finesse over strength. So that's all I can really give. And it took a little while, but you have to just keep playing around with that, and then that will finally come apart. Definitely don't forget to reattach that also. And then getting everything ready so that you could pry it up didn't take that long. I think I said 2 hours. And then be patient when you're trying to pry that cover up. Mine didn't pop right up like Rogers did in the video. It took a little bit of prying underneath there with a combination of screwdrivers, and then anytime you can use plastic as a pry piece, that was better as well. And then eventually it starts coming up, and then you have to kind of remove that gasket as it's pulling up and away. My old gasket was very brittle. It was pretty much like plastic. Had no elastic properties like rubber does at all when I removed it. But it did stay intact. It was stuck onto the valve cover. And I know the shop wanted to actually have me get a new valve cover if they were going to do the repair, and I could see why now. I didn't get a new valve cover, but I spent about 45 minutes pulling little bits of gasket out of the crevice there, just really taking my time because it just comes out in pieces, and you want to be really careful not to break anything on that valve cover. So I really took my time, and eventually I finally got all of it removed. Around the cylinder holes, that was not as brittle. That came out in one piece, but it was in between the cylinders. That rubber piece was just like plastic breaking apart when I removed it with needle nose pliers. I also changed the eccentric shaft sensor preventatively since I had everything open. Might as well just change that out so I don't have to come back and do that again. And then I put a little bit of seafoam in each of the cylinders. I had to, take that spark plug number 3 out, clean that up a little bit, and then I ended up just taking all the spark plugs out. I didn't need to replace them because I had done that only about 10,000 miles ago. But I put a little bit of seafoam in each of the cylinders just to kind of clean things out and put everything back together. The cover went back on pretty smoothly, and then the reassembly went fairly quick. And then I just wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about the overall outcome since doing this. So the BMW Clunk, that I thought was related to the transmission service I did, but that is completely gone now from doing this valve cover gasket. The BMW Clunk, I don't notice it at all when I come to a stop. I don't feel any rough downshift or anything like that. And it's just a lot smoother at lower engine speeds and when it's transitioning at high RPM speeds. It just feels like it's a BMW again. I didn't notice how rough it was getting. So that is just really good. In the morning when I would put it in reverse, it felt like it was slamming in gear, and I sometimes would even put it in neutral quickly to coast back down the driveway. Now it's not really doing that. It's just kind of nicely shifting into reverse. It's working so much better. The only thing that I noticed is the RPMs still bounce a little bit when I start it, and I think that's probably because of a dirty fuel filter, which is probably the last maintenance I need to do for a while on this car. So that's probably going to be the next thing that I do. Appreciate you guys joining me for this video. Hope you liked it, even though this format was a little bit different. Thanks. If you like this, consider subscribing and stay tuned for the next video. Potentially it's going to be the fuel filter replacement on an E83. Thank you.